This afternoon, the Winnipeg Jets acquired forward Nino Niederreiter from the Nashville Predators in exchange for a 2024 second-round pick. Niederreiter has played 56 games for Nashville this season. He's got 18 goals, 10 assists for 28 points. His salary is $4 million, and he's under contract for next season as well. We'll have plenty on this trade in the Winnipeg Jets weekend on Monday's edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily, streaming here on YouTube at 1 p.m. Central Time and available on podcast. I caught up with Scott Billeck of the Winnipeg Sun earlier today to give our thoughts on the trade. Before we get to my conversation with Scott, I want to ask you, what do you think of the trade? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you haven't yet, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. Scott, happy Saturday evening. Where were you when you heard about the Nino Niederreiter trade? And what was your initial reaction?
Well, I was watching like this fifth episode of Drive to Survive because I'm a big F1 guy. My first reaction was, okay, well, great trade, like a great player. Niederreiter's obviously, been around the block in the playoffs. I think he has 82 games. That's a full season of games played in the playoffs. So, that was one of the things in my preview that I did last weekend of the trade. I was, Nino Niederreiter was on my list as a middle six option that they could get, because he checks a lot of boxes. And so I was like, okay, well, my first reaction was, okay, so they got one of the players that I had on my list, so that's nice. A broken clock is right twice a day, and I was right for once. But no, it was, the reaction was, okay, what's the return? And then when you see the return being a second-round pick, I'm like, man, the Jets got a bit of a steal here. They get a guy with term, so he's got 1 year left after this year at $4 million AAV, which is good. It's a good play. He's a right winger. He can play on the left side too, so he's versatile. But he can play on the right wing in Winnipeg and in the top six. They lose Cole Perfetti to injury, season or regular season-ending injury, let's say for now. See what his return is and his status for the playoffs is. But you're getting a guy who's scored 20 goals and he's on the verge of his seventh season scoring 20 goals. This year he's got 18 so far. And his analytics are unbelievable. This is the one thing about Nino Niederreiter that maybe a lot of people don't see, is that almost every year that he's been in the NHL, I think except his rookie season, positive possession player, positive expected goals. So he chips in there. He's got a bit of feistiness to his game. You're reading tweets as they go along. You're talking to some people around the league after the trade that get, teams that he's played on, and even, so teams that have played him quite a bit. And Jets will remember him because he played for the Minnesota Wild for several seasons before going to Carolina in 2018-19 at the trade deadline that year. He's a bit of a thorn in the side. And if you remember, if Jets fans will remember, that's his job. He can score. He creates a lot of offense. He creates a lot of plays or chances. Offensively, but he can also play that kind of at the same time, play that kind of gritty role and really get into the skin. And let's go back to Friday night. It was a tough game for the Winnipeg Jets. They lose 5-1. The team looked a little bit soft in that game. Like it just wasn't a good game for the Jets. And Nino Niederreiter, he's going to obviously pitch in offensively. He might, depending where he lands right now, I imagine he's in the top six to begin with, just because of the Perfetti injury. But if he goes down to the third line at some point, he's going to offer scoring there. But he's also just a good possession player. And so he adds a lot of that to this team. It's a good trade. You're looking at, it takes a little bit of the heat off of that loss on Friday night against the Avalanche, because the next day, the response, and we're waiting to see what the response on the ice for the Jets is going to be on Sunday against the Islanders. But the response off of it was to go out and get a player. And, I don't know how long, we haven't talked to Kevin Cheveldayoff yet about, how long this was in kind of the works, or did it just kind of transpire, overnight this morning. In the second period of the Avalanche game. It takes a little bit of the heat off of that. It gives some hope that this team is going to make some big moves. And, with a $4 million AAV, and with Axel Johnson-Fialbi being sent back to the Moose today, The Jets still have about $5.5 million come Friday, and right now about 4.7 million right now to work with heading into the deadline day. And if they make it that far, without making any moves, they'll have 5.5 million on Friday to kind of make something happen. You think it's probably the first foot has fallen here for the Jets, and now you kind of wait and see what's going to happen. But I mean, a good player for a second round pick in 2024 is a good trade for the Winnipeg Jets, and it was a bit of a stroke of it was a stroke of genius, I think, from Ken Cheveldayoff. I mean, he gets something that this team needs, and and still a lot of cap room. Didn't give up much capital in terms of his prospects, and not a lot of capital in terms of his draft picks. So there's still room to strike, and I'd imagine this was just the first of what could be a couple moves still coming from the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, I'll say I was playing hockey, so I got off the ice, checked my phone. I mean, that's the first thing you do when you get off. Everyone's just sitting there on their phones, and I got the alert from like 3 different apps because
right.
I'm that hardcore, and I think everyone is fired up about the trade. You're wondering what's his salary? $4 million, pretty reasonable. And then also what they gave up, a second round pick next year. But then you see, is he a UFA? You'd think, was he a UFA after this season? But no, he's got 1 year left on his deal, and a number of players, 1 year after this year, and a number of players we know are expiring after next season. And you do wonder if it doesn't work out. Well, so what? You trade him next year and get that pick back, or at least you have the option if you want, or they put their foot on the gas and go for it again, depending on how it goes this year. So we talked all week. They need scoring. They need bottom 6. Then the Perfetti injury happens, and you kind of have a hole there in your top 6. And this is a guy that, and I didn't think too many people had brought him up. None of the big insiders were mentioning him. And Chevy finds a way to get these guys that aren't talked about. We always talk about Paul Stastny, but this was one. I think this is a great trade. I pulled up his stats before, as you said. He's got 18 goals, 28 points. He likes to shoot the puck, a big body. I'm a big fan.
That's one thing, right? Like he likes to shoot, and so the scouting report on him was like, here's a guy who doesn't, I don't know how many times Jets fans have screamed their lungs out, right? Like trying to, get a guy to shoot. Well, here's a guy who prefers to, and often he's very selfish with the puck and does shoot it. So, I think that also kind of adds an element of, selfishness to whatever line he's on. It's like, you can get this guy the puck and he's gonna shoot it when you think he should shoot it and when he probably should shoot it. So, I think that is another element of this trade where they got a guy who's a little more selfish with it and maybe brings that, maybe kind of shows the way a little bit, for some of the other guys on this team that, kind of want to seem to pass the puck into the net, at least these days. And, there's a lot of killers on this team, but sometimes they're not really, there's a hesitancy to pull the trigger. And, with Nino Niederreiter, that's not his issue. He likes to shoot the puck. And so, it's a good trade for the team. I mean, I don't know who would say it wouldn't be a good trade. I mean, they barely gave up anything. A pick for next year's draft. It's not even a second rounder in 2023. So, that's an interesting part of it too, is a lot of people have said this is a deep draft coming up, and you haven't had to get rid of, a pick in it just yet. We'll see. I mean, they don't have all their picks for this year's draft, but, they still have that first rounder that they could potentially, throw out there for the big name that they want to get, if there still is one, or they can hold on to it. And if they end up trading Pierre-Luc Dubois, it's going to be this summer, and you probably get back into the first round anyways, whoever you trade him to. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that whole thing plays out. But I mean, you give this trade at least a B plus and probably an A. It's a piece of the puzzle that this team needs, and they went out and got it. So, but they've identified a player that could fill that need, and still get some term. Which, I mean, this team loves to have term, right? You want to have some certainty. Because not everybody wants to be in Winnipeg. I mean, we know that quite well. So, but it's it's a good trade for a team that's in need of some help right now, and they got it for relatively low cost. And I think a lot of people are going to like what they see from Niederreiter once he gets in the lineup. Probably not on Sunday, but on Tuesday before the last game before the deadline. So yeah,
Yeah, Saraleski saying that Tuesday, looking
yeah,
like definitely not. Tomorrow, just looking at the Jets picks in 2023, they don't have a second round pick from the Dillon trade or a
right.
fourth round pick that was in the Appleton trade.
And they
And
had all
they,
their 2024 picks until they traded the second round.
yeah.
I
And then
think
the
they still have.
sixth, yeah, the
Yeah,
sixth they traded away in that Cop trade. They didn't have 3 picks from 2023, but this is for 2024. So again, you could probably get that back at some point if you
yeah,
trade, one of the other we'll see. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I joked before we started, 10 we could talk how much time can we talk about how great a trade this is for the Jets
yeah.
for all the reasons. I mean, not giving up a lot, filling a need, getting a guy who can shoot the puck, as you said. I mean, Bonus talks about passing up shots all the time. But
Yeah.
my question for you is Nino going to be the best player that they acquire before the deadline? And I'm sure there's going to be, I mean, a couple more. I don't know if they decide to give up prospects or more picks
Yeah.
in a deal, but I'm assuming that this is the first of a couple down the pipe. I set the over-under at 2.5 players acquired, but I think that was a pretty low number. So is Nino going to be the most talented player that they get at this deadline?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, right? I mean, which way are they leaning on defense? Do they want like a Luke Shen type player who's, big, gritty, likes to hit? Would they like to in on a John Klingberg out of Anaheim if they were able to retain, if Anaheim's willing to retain half of his $7 million 1-year deal, who adds more offense to their back end? He would be the biggest name, I suppose, at least in terms of, everybody knows kind of who John Klingberg is. Big money deal, obviously, for 1 year in Anaheim. It hasn't really panned out in Anaheim, but Anaheim is Anaheim this year, and they're in the running, let's say, for Connor Bedard, and they're not really having a great year. So how much of Klingberg's tough season is really just down to the team that he plays for. But there's other guys. I mean, did the Jets now look at an Ivan Barbashev, who Stanley Cup experience, again, another middle six player that they could figure that they could work into the line, but I'm not sure they're, it sounds like they're not in on Timo Meier because of the lack of potential to get an extension done now. And it seems like a lot of the focus now has shifted to teams who are just willing to pay the rental fee and get him in as a rental and then deal with whatever later after the playoffs. So I don't know if Timo Meier is going to be an option for the Jets, just the way that they kind of make deals. So maybe it'll depend, right? Like I would still think that the over is good there. If you're setting it at 2.5, still think there's a couple holes that need to be plugged here, and one of them will be somebody on defense. It's an argument whether they need another 6 defensemen. Do they need a top pairing guy? Klingberg would kind of fit that role potentially, playing alongside Josh Morrissey, but I don't know. I mean, that's just the one thing. Do they look at Parayko and a Barbashev out of St. Louis and try and get a package like Toronto did with O'Reilly and Noel Acciari? So, there's a lot of different things. Is Sam Lafferty a guy that they want to go after? What about Nick Schmaltz? Maybe Jacob Chychrun. Like, I don't think Chychrun's really an option for the Jets. There was some talk about Nick Schmaltz. Nick Schmaltz would be a good pick too, I think. Again, a guy who probably could use a change of scenery. Arizona's not a great team, and you don't have to see a lot of guys in Arizona having a wildly successful seasons. But yeah, I mean, I think there's still room to make cap space for sure. I mean, they have the potential to have $5.5 million as by next Friday after everything's accrued and all that sort of thing. So that's a lot of cap space to work with, and with some teams willing to retain salaries and all that sort of stuff, I think there's still a lot of options to definitely strengthen this lineup. And like I said earlier, I think at least 2 more moves is probably kind of where the Jets would be looking, just to kind of cover off not only the Perfetti injury, but just plugging some of the, or mitigating or filling some of the pieces of the puzzle that still need to be kind of filled before they head into the playoffs in a couple months' time, or 6 weeks' time almost now. I guess we're getting close to that 6-week mark till the playoffs start.
Getting down to it. The Jets currently, You wouldn't think so after the way they played last night against Colorado, but still second in the Central. They're very well
Yeah.
positioned, and you do have to wonder if that trade was made during the second period of last night's game. That's a funny one, God. But
Right.
you have to think that there may be a bit more urgency just after since the calendar flipped to 2023. Have had problems scoring. I haven't got much scoring for your bottom six, and now since Perfetti's out, I mean, then you really need some help. And they went and they filled out a need. I don't know what you think Niederreiter is going to line up, but just bumping,
Yeah,
Appleton out of the
I think
top. But
Appleton, yeah, for now,
here,
right? But
so I did this. I did Connor Scheifele, just a quick one. I mean, Connor
yeah,
Scheifele, just based on how it started last game, bumped out Appleton, put in Niederreiter, and put in Appleton with Barron and Lowry. They seem to like that. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with this fourth line if Sam Gagner rotates in and out, and they have
yeah,
just a nice rotation there with Menelainen, Stanley, and Kuhlman. We'll have to wait and see who else they add before the deadline. But I wonder if they get this blender out for It's pretty clear who the top six forwards are on this team right now.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think Niederreiter probably fits in exactly where you have him right now because I think this team still wants to find out if Barron, Lowry, and Appleton can actually be a shutdown line. Um, you know, there's an argument, right? Like, do you want a third line scoring line or do you want a 2017-18 third line where it was, Appleton or not Appleton, sorry, Tanev, Lowry, and Andrew Kopp, who were tasked with shutting down the other team's best. It's something they did almost all that whole season. They became elite at it in terms of possession metrics and all that stuff. So analytically, that line was among the best in the NHL that season. They haven't really had let's say a consistent third line this season because of all the injuries. I mean, the fact that Mason Appleton's up on the top line because Cole Perfetti's out, and they've really struggled to try and even find a top six guy to kind of stay there. So maybe Niederreiter's that guy. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what you're looking at for the possible lines, and yeah, just to go back to your one point because we talked about this before coming on. I mean, I think this team is, to borrow a term from poker, they're pot committed this season. Your chip stack is in poker. You've put enough in already that you might as well shove the rest of your chips in because it makes sense math wise and all of that. And so this is a team that you can see it in a couple years. A lot of expiring contracts. We've talked about this ad nauseum about Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler. I'm missing one.
Oh, Pierre-Luc Dubois
might be gone by this summer. So this might be your only year with these guys and this core being together and all that stuff before real decisions need to be made about is anybody resigning? Are you trading these guys at next year's deadline? Like, what does next season look like? At this point, it doesn't matter. I think you got to go all in on this season, see what you can get out of what you might have remaining from some of these guys that have been with this team for a long time. So, this is the year to do it. And, I think the Jets trading for Niederreiter, we'll see how it ends up. But I mean, I think that kind of shows the intention of going all in. It didn't cost them a lot, but he's the type of player that you would want to try and do it. And then, with that extra year left, if it goes south next year and they don't have Pierre-Luc Dubois and all that stuff, you can flip Nino Niederreiter at the trade deadline and probably recoup what you had. So, yeah, it's a team that needs to go all in this year. I think we've talked about that. Everybody's talked about that. I mean, that seems to be the consensus. And I think, adding Niederreiter is the type of player, that you would want and kind of signal the fact that, yeah, I mean, they're going for it. And Kevin Cheveldayoff still got a few moves up his sleeve to try and, bolster his squad and give it the best chance to, take down a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I love that poker analogy. They are definitely pot committed this season. And with the UFAs, Wheeler, Scheifele, Niederreiter, probably Dubois after Dubois, depending on what happens.
Yeah.
Dylan and DeMello also UFAs after next season. This is the time, and you got the best goal. Oh, Hellebuyck too. How could I forget him?
That's the other thing. Like we haven't even said that. Like you can't waste another year of maybe him. I mean, it's arguable, But I mean, right now he's shown that he's one of the best goalies in the world, and he's been playing like that all season. And I mean, it depends what you think about Linus Ullmark in Boston and the way that he's played. Obviously, tremendous Ilya Sorokin and the Islanders. But if you're looking at, a guy who's elevated his team to a bunch of wins and that sort of thing, it's been Connor Hellebuyck. And again, so he may win the Vezina this year. I mean, how do you not try and, again, 2 years left on that deal for Connor Hellebuyck? Will he be here in 2 years' time? Who knows? I mean, I think he would be the number one guy that this team wants to re-sign going forward, but they got to give him a reason to re-sign here. And one part of that is going all in this year. And that might not even be enough because, this team might have to go through a rebuild and all that, but you can't waste this year of Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, they've done it far too often in the past. And, this can't be another year where they waste, the prime and an elite season by one of the world's best goalies right now, and that would be inexcusable. And I think with the Niederreiter trade, it's showing that they're probably not going to be doing that. But a week to go now, and we'll see what else the Jets can kind of cobble together here before the deadline.